issue. I would like to emphasize on the point of timelines and how long it takes for the approval. Because when we present our documents and filming projects for approval, we give a timeline and the schedule of when we are shooting. So when the approvals take long, it collides with the shooting schedule that we have prepared. So that's also a concern, mainly for the drone issue. Also, maybe you can clarify to me, KFC and KFCB, the difference between the license we get, annual license from KFCB, and the annual license that you have talked about from KFC. Thank you so much.
Okay. Mr. Wasi, you want to go first before communications? Yes, you can proceed.
Great. I'll respond to your two questions. First of all, I would like to clarify that Kenya Film Commission doesn't issue any license, but our sister agency, KFCB, does issue a filming license. That is the position. Number two, you talked about licenses being sought for by county governments and what we are doing to address that issue. This is an issue, I will refer you to the Constitution 2010, Schedule 4, where issues to do with recreation services, the county governments are actually given specific roles to manage cinema halls and so on. But when it comes to filming, that is still a national service which has not been transferred at all. So the solution to this, I would like to confirm that in the film policy draft that we currently have is meant to address that and come up with what we call a one-stop shop for all filming across the country. So that is how we intend to address that issue. Then when it comes to liaison services with the other government agencies, I would like to put this forth as a challenge to all filmmakers. A number of times, my phone doesn't stop ringing because somebody has been arrested somewhere. They were doing something illegal, and the only person who will be able to sort them out is Timothy Oase at Kenya Film Commission. I would like you to engage the commission at all times. From the time you start writing your script, engage the commission's liaison services so that they can work with you in terms of which offices you like to reach out to. If you like to reach out to KCA or Communications Authority, KEKOBO, KRA, we have a relationship with all these institutions, and the commission, in its verge to offer you services, it has set up a specific department to offer you that service, and the service that we offer is actually for free. We do not charge you to offer you liaison services. You may seek to get to know how you can be able to access national parks, if you want to engage KRA, if you want to engage KEKOBO, and all this is available at any given time. We are automating our service delivery services through the e-film shop, and very soon you will be in a position to get all your responses without having to actually make a phone call or send an email. So my challenge to you is engage and engage and engage. Thank you.
Yes, Emil, before we go to Communication Peter response, you can advise him on what to do to ensure to avoid delays in his shooting schedule when it comes to applying for permits.
Okay, thanks, Ruth. Paul, I understand where you're coming from, but I want to give you a more detailed overview so you get to understand where we are also coming from and all other agencies. You want a drone permit to shoot. Certain countries in this world actually don't allow drones to fly because they look at it as a disruptive technology, and the threats, most of the security threats that are evident to each one of you are what are looked at. Nevertheless, because there's the benefit too, and we and all these other agencies here, and the government wants you to get the benefits from drones. So when you put in your request, we have to analyze, my experts have to analyze where you're going to fly, the airspace. Is it in any restricted airspace? Some requests that we get, somebody wants to fly a drone, as I mentioned, in the national park at night. Now, Is this guy communicating with poachers? What's his intent? So there are a lot of things that we need to look at. So in something like that, then we have to correspond with our KWS to get that approval, such that it's done in a controlled setting. But nonetheless, as Timothy mentioned, Kenya Film Commission, you work with them, and at the end of the day, we are working to streamline that process. So by the time you come to get a drone permit, we're able to quickly analyze what you'd like to do, and then approve the permit, make sure you've engaged with all the other partners, all other partner agencies that need to approve you to facilitate your operation. And further to that, the KCA is in the process of procuring what's called a UTM or UTMS, an unmanned traffic management system. Now, this is going to help us to ensure that only legal drones within the Republic of Kenya are able to fly, and we're able to see where each one of them are. I'll cap it off by adding that Kenya, being a signatory to the International Civil Aviation Organization, Chicago Convention, the treaty, we have to abide by international laws. And all our visitors come in to see the beautiful products that Kenya has to offer. In any way, if there's anything that becomes a danger to civil aviation, what's going to happen, and it could even happen overnight, is Kenya is deemed unsafe. And when that happens, it's going to have a negative repercussion, because overnight you could end up into a situation where KQ or any airline operating from Kenya is prevented from flying outside the borders of Kenya. And even worse, all the international airlines that come into Kenya, BA, KLM, Qatar, Emirates, and there's a long list of them who bring quite a number of visitors, will be told, Kenya is not a safe country to come into, so the insurance premiums sky high by even 2,000 or 3,000%, making it more costly for people to come. So that's why, in what we do, like I mentioned, our mandate is to regulate and develop the industry. However, it needs to be done in a safe and secure way. So when you put the permit, last week I approved a drone to fly, I think it was at 10 o'clock at night. Remember, we're only supposed to be in the office from 8 to 5. Nevertheless, we go beyond the call of duty, and if we need to facilitate the industry or any stakeholder to achieve his objectives, then we do so. So again, as was mentioned, we really have to cooperate and collaborate. So you come to us with a request, we're able to tell you this is what you need to do. But I know there's room for improvement, and working with all the agencies, those are some of the things that we are doing to ensure that we don't just make things difficult for people, but we work hand in hand to help you achieve your objectives. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Peter, you can proceed.
Thank you. So Boniface, you've asked a very good question, and we are happy that Kiswahili is being adopted across the region and across the continent. What are we doing to progress this? First, the mandate of the authority is limited to Kenya. So directly we may not do much, but indirectly we are doing something. One of the ways that we're doing it, since CA is the government representative to the regional telecom organization like ESC, IACO, ITU in Africa region, those are forums in which as we participate, we encourage this to be done. But there is a negative aspect to it. For example, under ESC, ESC, East African Communication, we have a docket for broadcasting. We're talking about local content quota. And the moment Kenya, we are using 40% local content quota, which is also a way of encouraging Kiswahili and local languages to be used in our broadcasting platform. Now, there is a proposal to first change the definition from Kenyan to East African community, then increase it to 60%. At a glance, it looks good, but noting that, talking to Kenyans, I hope, noting that Kenyans will like content from Tanzania, so there's a likelihood that when we adopt the 60% and open the doors to content from the East African region, Kenya may be flooded by a lot of local content in quotes, but not Kenyan content. So that is the challenge. Because some of us, we like the Kiswahili from Tanzania, yeah? Bongo, those kind of music and all those kind of thing. So it is good, but it has also its own downsides. But that's the discussion we are having. When we are licensing, we encourage licensees who are going to do it in the local languages and especially in the national language of Kiswahili. But that is the much we can do. I don't know whether I've helped. Thank you.
Okay, by show of hands, how many have questions? Because we are running out of time. Yes, anyone else? Okay, we can just wind up with your question. Thank you.
Okay, so my name is Boniface Nyaga from the Daily Nation. And I've written very many stories about death by regulation. Every time a new regulation comes up, how it's killing the industry. And I'm very happy to hear what Timothy is saying about the engagement versus enforcement. So my question to Timothy is, there's a perception because of the long history of regulators playing more of an enforcement role as opposed to an engagement role. So most creatives feel that the people on that side of the panel are more roadblocks rather than a highway helping them achieve their dreams. So, and maybe it's a question I can pose to all of you. How are you working hard to change that perception? Because as long as people have a perception that these organizations are more of roadblocks, they won't approach you, they won't seek, so they'll rather go and, you know, the way Kenyans, we like kienyeji things. So my question to all of you is, what are you doing to change that perception of enforcement, and what are you doing to increase engagement in your organizations?
Okay, we can start with Emil, and then lastly, Timothy can wind up.
Okay, thank you, Boniface. Yes, that's something even us at KCA, we realized that there's lack of understanding and the perceived fear that a regulator is there to only enforce, not enhance. But there's a paradigm shift that has been taking place, even with the standards and recommended practices that emanate from the International Civil Aviation Organization, where it's to empower a lot of, instead of being compliance-based, that you have to do this, you have to do that, we're encouraging more proactive-based and a collaborative kind of engagement, where you as the operator are able now to come up with your safety performance indicators and then looking more to a risk-based analysis of your operations. Now, like to you creatives, ever since I took over, we've been planning to have more engagements. We are open to the stakeholders. So we have more engagements with all stakeholders. Encourage stakeholders to know that as much as we're there to regulate the industry and ensure that certain standards are complied with, also create an enabling platform where we are there to help you. You have certain creative ideas, you just don't know how to put them together using our platform. That's why we come in and work with you and show you that maybe you cannot do it this way, but this is actually a better way to do it. Because at the end of the day, how are we going to develop the industry if we just say no, no, no? So the case here is going to have quite a number of engagements with all stakeholders. And yeah, just to allay those fears and to change that negative perception that regulators are just there to stand as a roadblock and it becomes us against them. That's a perception that really needs to die. So for us, we are definitely working on it. And if I can speak for my colleagues, I'm sure they're doing the same thing too. Thank you.
Mr. Ambua.
Yes, for KFCB, we hear where you are coming from, but again, you also need to appreciate that regulators must be there to ensure there is fair play in the market, so that some players are not doing things that hurt others. So the regulators have a very important role there in ensuring that they manage the sector in a manner that fosters fairness, equity, and so forth. And just to add on what our colleague has said, at KFCB, we realized, for instance, that the rates that we charge for classification are way up there. And that's why we are saying, instead of doing it we are willing to train the industry to self-classify. And our role will just be to check, are we complying or not? By allowing broadcasters, video on demand, and OTT platforms to self-classify to the extent of 70%. We are saving industry 7% of funds that should have paid in regulatory fees, and therefore enabling the sector to deploy those, or sector players to deploy those saved funds to the development of the sector. So don't look at regulators all the time as if they are there to enforce. Enforcement is good. For us, we believe that we must monitor what is being, displayed and exhibited in the public space because of the need to protect minors from inappropriate content. So there are also benefits of enforcement, but again, as we've indicated, we need to engage more, we need to listen much more, so that we can be able to readjust and tweak regulation to meet the requirements of industry. Thank you very much.
Yes, Peter. Oh, George.
Okay, thank you so much, Bon, with your question. It's all about perception. The regulators are there to be able to ensure that there is a level ground in terms of doing your work. The rules are there to be followed. And with perception, now everything is affected. For instance, what we do at copyright, we have an enabling environment upon which the creative can be able to thrive their business. With perception, everything is distorted. We work in an environment that must be regulated. Without regulation, then it will be not be business as usual. So the most important thing that we are doing is how do we deal with the perception in the creative industry. And one thing that I've realized with the creative industry is lack of information, awareness issues. For instance, you have your work. You don't know how to go about using that work for purposes of commercialization. And how do you use it so that you protect it against somebody else who may be able to use your work to benefit? That is what also is killing industry. There are those who know they want to take advantage. Now the government comes there to regulate and ensure that should be a fair playing ground. For instance, at copyright, initially we were charging for the registration of copyright at 1,000 shillings. And then there is a window still that is existing that we said, if you have your work, come to us, go to our NRL platform, register for free. It has been running for the last 1 year. But I can tell you, we have only registered 32,000. Could you tell me that that's a perception? It could be. But the most important thing is that people need to be informed. And we can only be able to inform you when we partner. We come in as a government to engage and tell you what we are doing, how you can be able to use the services that we have for purposes of moving forward with your business. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Allow me to come through and then Timothy will wrap it up. Thank you. So, yes, it is a perception that has been with us for quite some time, and it may take time for it to come out of our minds. Even noting that we have come from a colonialistic regime whereby we are used to being forced to do even what we know is right. So it will take some time. But as an authority, what we have done is to come up with the consumer engagement fora so that we can be able to explain. And for example, we have this Kikao Kiku forum where we go to every county. And in the county, what we do is that we allow ourselves not to be the ones who are speaking on our behalf. We bring the licensees to speak to the citizen. Because we realize that sometimes people blame the authority for what the media houses are supposed to do, for example. But when we have this session and we bring the media houses and we bring the Kenyans, then Kenyans are able to engage directly with the media houses and will be there to, like referee or facilitators, to ensure that there is truth being shared and matters are being progressed. We also have a complaint email whereby you can send, and we have a system which will be able to come back to you very fast. And then we also come to the broadcasters, for example. We have sensitization forum whereby we come to the houses and have an engagement with them to show them what they're supposed to comply with and why it is important for them to comply with. And we have seen that bearing quite some fruits. And then also, when you invite us for your own occasions, we have had situation whereby even some stations have invited us to their board meetings to just sit down and explain to their board what the regulation entails. And by doing that, we are getting quite positive feedback. Because I think a lot of perception was created because of whatever happened in the past. But I think things have moved forward. We operate using an open office policy. You can walk in anytime and see me, and we can be able to see what you can offer. Lastly, we are considering a sort of sandboxing so that we are not closing your ideas. If you have an idea which you think can help us as a nation, come and let's sit down, let's see how we can sandbox that idea and see how far it can go. So we are open to your thoughts and your ideas. We are open for your comments. If there's a specific area where you feel we can do better, we're here to listen. Speak to us and let's see what we can do together. Thank you.
Okay. I'll exempt Mr. Wafula, because if we open this discussion of taxes, and Kenyans will talk about how taxes were overtaxed, they are too high, that's another debate. So you can take it.
Thank you, Ruth.
Yes.
First of all, just an appreciation that world over, governments are there to bring order and law in operations of its affairs. So all the agencies that support the film industry established or mandated by the Kenya government are there to bring order in the way we undertake screen sector business. What I would like to remind each creative is that each of these organizations represented here, each of these organizations has what we call a service charter. And we are there to actually offer you service, not to bully you or to do anything contrary to what is expected to us. I would like to reassure you that at Kenya Film Commission, for example, my office is your office. That is a public office, and I'm there to offer you service. And I believe that applies to all of us. So anytime you need to access any given services within government, I don't think you need to shy away, because those who offer services in these particular offices are Kenyans, and they are there to offer you services so that we are able to move our country from where it is to the next level. Something else, there is what we call the Service Delivery Charter, and this applies across all government offices. I would like to indulge each creative to familiarize. For example, if you came to my office, what does my service charter say? That if you send me an email, I should be able to respond within what time? If you made a phone call, how many rings should we be able to get back to you and all that? So all I'm trying to say is that we have an opportunity, and we should never run away from regulation, because regulation just brings order. And for the sake of this industry, I want to challenge you that we have guilds and associations. We should actually create these guilds to be as strong as we can, so that you have a unified voice when you are indulging government. That will make your work more easier, as we also strive to see to it that as the industry, we focus more on self-regulation. But of course, self-regulation doesn't come without the government having to watch over you. We'll have to do what we have to do, because it is important that there is order within the industry. But help us to actually enforce that order. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Owase. So we have come to the conclusion of this panel discussion, this roundtable on industry regulation. I'd like to thank our panelists. Thank you for joining us, and I'd like to thank all of you for participating. We don't have much time, because the next panel session is about to begin, which is going to be moderated by Mr. Ezekiel Onyango. It's on film financing and investment options in the creative sector. So thank you so much. Asante.
but it's only through guidance and training that this can be achieved. At Talanta Institute, we empower you with practical skills in media studies, music production, animation, digital marketing, DJing, and performing arts. We also mentor in life skills to bring out the champion in you. Call us on 0734 777778. Talanta Institute, unveiling champions. You are born a champion, but it's only through guidance and training that this can be achieved. At Talanta Institute, we empower you with practical skills in media studies, music production, animation, digital marketing, DJing, and performing arts. We also mentor in life skills to bring out the champion in you. Call us on 0734 777778. Talanta Institute, unveiling champions. You are born.
We put 4 strangers in a room. It was awkward, but not for so long.
Excuse me, how do you like your coffee?
I like it hot, strong, and black.
I like me a cappuccino. Brewed coffee has that natural tingling feel to it.
It just runs through your veins like, oh, makes you so relaxed. That's why I like my coffee house. I like it strong.
Double espresso for you.
Anytime is coffee time.
Anytime is coffee time.
The barista prepared the coffee according to how they liked it.
Here's our coffee.
Thank you.
Dorman's Coffee. Do you guys know that Dorman's is actually the leading brand in coffee in Kenya? Like, coffee is fuel for the body.
Yeah. You know coffee? It's just a boring day.
From strangers to friends, just cause of coffee.
In campus, it was like, I needed to move.
Yeah.
International Coffee Day, a global celebration of coffee from the farms to our cups. Share a coffee with a friend, a colleague, or someone you love, because good things happen over good coffee. Dormans, the coffee experts.
My name is Alfred Mukangai, a barrister at Safari Park Hotel. We would like to thank Dormans for the great support they are giving us in terms of supplying coffee, the best coffee in town, the best coffee in the country, and the equipments. And at the same time giving us a very fully equipped training on how to make the best coffees in town. So we would like just to thank each and every customers, and we welcome you that we can keep on enjoying our coffee with Dormans and Safari Park as we keep on enhancing our services.
Unaona ukirudi shule kesho?
Mama alienda kutafuta fees na hajarudi hadi sasa hivi.
Shida yako ni ulipe fee na mimi ni nyama. Tulisikizana unalipa
na tulisikizana usiwe kanyaga hapo.
She came to church looking for help. I couldn't let her sleep in the streets.
Cindy, you have to be smart. You don't go around picking strangers and bringing them in the house. I want her gone.
Sam!
Toka uende na usirudi tena. Ende na uende kabisa.
Alikwambia ni mtoto wa shule ukamwamini?
Now get it, this one. This is a warning, Cindy. Stay away from that girl or you'll live to regret.
I'm telling you, Sammy is not what you think.
Sam ananijua tena vizuri sana. Ni kupretend tu Sam ana pretend. Kuna kitu anajaribu kuficha. When will you ever stop looking down on me, Sam? This is me when I'm sober.
Mama, sasa mbona hukuniambia?
Guys, meet Allison, my fiancée.
You're the one stealing my best son away from us.
I am.
Welcome to the Jambo family, where I am the official black sheep.
Come on, Justin. What do you think you're doing? That's my business. What are you doing? Bring my chicken back. Come on, Justin. You, come on. You, that's my chicken, Justin.
Fireman.
You are going to strangle my son because he broke a glass. What more? No.
You have no right to call the police on your brother. Do you understand me? But he's a thief. He's a criminal. Oh, shut up.
I'd love to go up in flames.
This is confusing.
I shouldn't be.
Come on, going. This is a celebration of 40 years of marriage between your mother and I. And we all have to be there as a family.
I'm not part of this family. You disowned me yesterday, remember?
Fireman.
But my head feels naked.
And change the head, not the wigs.
Mom, I don't think that wig and head wrap goes with your dress.
Mama, change, eh?
Yeah.
For goodness sake, never, ever, ever mention wrong anything, clothes or color to your mother.
What? I was just commenting.
This reminds me of our wedding day. She kept the whole church waiting for 1 whole hour as she tried to dress up to look nice. When she came out, she looked uglier than she was before makeup. How can anyone look so horrible? Dressed up like that? Oh, what's wrong with you women?
But the Bible tells me so. My brigade, number 28.
My family is so embarrassing.
I'd want you to remember me as a brother who was never fake.
Jesus loves me. You.
Unaandamania nani?
Ile serikali iliwanyima kazi.
na ikawanyima kiongozi mwenye wali.
Hatujaipata leader in Kenya mwenye anashughulikia youth.
The boss says the shoot to kill order continues.
I swear to God, I did not kill that child.
Get your filthy hands off me!
Unajua ni polisi, lakini unajua kwa hii country mnyonge ana haki.
Mimi sina shida na nani amekuwa rais. Shida yangu kubwa ni watu innocent watazidi kufa mpaka lini?
Hapa kwa street hakuna mtu innocent.
Since when the 6-month-old child go to the streets to riot? Si kila mtu ameuliwa na polisi uletwa hapa. Wengine utupwa.
Wapi?
Sijui. Labda kwa lake.
After considering the evidence tendered before this honorable court by both the prosecution and the defense, this court finds
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you very much. My names are Ezekiel Onyango, and I'd like to introduce my panelists today. And for that, I'll allow them to speak directly. I'll start with the very lovely lady at the end over there. And while you do your introductions, I would like you to tell me about yourself and a fun fact about you before we dive deep into the conversation today. Thank you. And just to let you know, we have one of our other panelists, Vanessa Buthelezi, who is joining us virtually from South Africa. So she'll also introduce herself, tell a little bit about what she does, and a fun fact about her. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Zianda Matsingwane. I am the Production and Development Manager at the KwaZulu-Natal Film Commission, which is based in Durban, South Africa. I think a fun fact about me is that I'm like a child. Like, I forget, like, we could have an argument or fight now, and 2 minutes later, I've forgotten. And so sometimes if people still have a beef with me, they'll be like, oh, mad, and then I forget that we're not talking. So, yeah, thank you. Lovely to meet you, and it's a privilege for me to be here.
Thank you, Zianda. A round of applause, please, for Zianda. The gentleman next to Zianda.
Hello. Habari ya leo. My name is George Gashara. Kwa Kiswahili naitwa George Gashara. I work with Hiva Fund, which is a finance, business support facility and market development facility for culture and creative industries here in Kenya, in the 5 East African countries. And recently we added 11 countries to the pocket. I'm very excited to be here because I can see so many familiar faces, and I like that jacket. A fun fact about me, I don't know whether it is fun, but I'm also a farmer. So the same skill set I have in farming is the same skill set I bring to creative industries. You have to have a lot of faith. You have to work late in the night and wake up quite early in the morning, and I enjoy those things. Yes.
Ezekiel was supposed to introduce us. This was not part of the brief. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is AP Matere, and I'm an executive producer. Well, I just call myself a new term now, a content creator. I'm a content creator. What is fun about me? Imagine if farming is fun. Hey, George, surely. Me, I'm a mother. I think that's a fun fact about me. I'm a mother of a 7-year-old boy, and I love spending time with him.
Asante sana, a round of applause for AP, and to our lovely, lovely, lovely Vanessa, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name, as you know, is Vanessa Buthelezi. I'm an executive broadcaster, commissioning editor at MultiChoice. And a fun fact about me would possibly be that I'm also in the music industry. I've currently been judging the South African Music Awards for 5 years. And I was previously a presenter on a deep house show called Hit Refresh, the longest running African house show. And it's a pleasure to be with you and an honor.
Thank you very much. Round of applause for her, please. So right now, I'll quickly touch on to our topic of today, which is film financing and investment options in the creative sector. This is a hot topic. It's something that's critical, timely, and without further ado, I would like to start with Mr. George. Simply because he said he comes from Hiva Fund. So the word fund is already very close to you, George. And I'd like you to just start by telling us what is film financing.
I think the word fund is a bit misleading. So if you start by thinking about money, then you've really you've lost it. You have to start to think about other things before you think about money. But because I'm speaking to hopefully people who are in film and audiovisual sector, the best way to give this story is to tell you why I fund films. And there inside you'll find your answer. About 15 years ago, a couple of my friends and I were interested in storytelling. We come from different families. Others had had equipment. Others had gone to film school. People like me had an opinion about watching films because we watched it with my family for many years. And so I could critique storylines and things. And so we called ourselves the Nest Collective, and we attempted to tell stories that were important to us. We started by making fashion films, because those could go on Facebook before TikTok and Instagram. There I reveal my age. So at the beginning of making our films, those number of years back, someone would borrow their parents' car. I would make sandwiches in the night. Someone else would create a call sheet and a rough script. We would go to Anuri's grandfather's house because it's a massive plot of land with different things, and we would create the script, and someone else would carry different clothes. And that way, we made films that ended up at some international film festivals. And at that point, we never thought about the question of funding. We never thought a person like George Gashara was there in the picture. And at that point, we created a catalog of films, something like 20, 30 films that were on YouTube, on Facebook, without ever asking someone for money. It was either fuel money and so on and so forth. So I consider at that level we were creating our voice, we were testing our aesthetics, we were amateur filmmakers. At amateur level, what we really needed is somewhere we could borrow a camera and the lens, or someone who could tell us, this is the amount of content you can shoot to get 2 minutes. And so at the beginning, development stage, there's a different type of resource that you need that might not be what George Gashara has. A few years later, we've been called to different, we've gone to Kalasha Film Festival, we have an award. We've gone to Macha Film Festival, it wasn't there then, but the equivalent, Lake Festival. And we started to think of ourselves as filmmakers. We want to finish university, but at least put more time in making film, maybe get some money out of it. I remember together with my friends, we went to Tribe Hotel, and we told them we can make for them a concept film for people to actually understand how the Tribe Hotel feels. And Sham gave us a chance, said, we'll give you food, and we'll give you a week here, as long as you don't interrupt my guests. And we made a film, and they put it on their website. And so at that point, we already had a CV, and now we wanted to start to commercialize our filmmaking. And so we started moving from amateur to something below professional, but just above student filmmaking. And so as we started to sophisticate, then we started to realize there's now room for other types of resources. And these are development resources. That an idea is not only the idea in your head. It has to be translated so that someone else can understand it. And then you have to bring other people who can tell you, this scene that you want to shoot a volcano, we can't create a volcano. What is the alternative of a volcano? Because in my dreams, I wanted a train. But we only have one train and the SGR, and you can't rent it. So you need professional advice. Professional advice comes with money. You have to pay API to tell you this can work, this can't. So as you start to professionalize your film, there are people who, I know I'm going a bit fast on time, but the point I'm trying to make, as you start to sophisticate, then you realize that also your needs start to sophisticate. And then there are opportunities around. You go to DocuBox, they help you with grants to get a treatment. You go to someone else, And so as you continue to sophisticate, different types of resources are required. And so I strongly believe that financing for film has to be at different levels in the life cycle. And even when you get to the top, where finally we made a film that was premiered at Berlinale, at IFFR or Durban Film Festival, by the time you're making that feature film, you already have created your CV, your ability to make money out of your collateral, and then George Gashara comes in. And George Gashara comes in many ways. I can finance, commercial investors can finance numerous things. They can come in as sponsors so that their bottled water can be seen front center on your screen. They can come in as debt investors because you need to buy equipment, you need to get working capital for your projects. They can also come as equity investors. They'll say, I believe in the projects that you want to make 5 of them, and we will take stakes so that we can share financing in the future. So at every level of your growth, you have different growth needs. And some people go into independent filmmaking where you want to tell social stories, you don't want to make money out of it. But those that go into commercial filmmaking, and I know Api Matere is a good poster child for making money on your films for many years, will share these ideas with us. As you go commercial, as you start to sophisticate, then you look for people other than your family, other than your immediate friends, and you can start to structure complex agreements that allow different types of resources to finance your film. In the next question, I'll be able to say what kind of structures that can be used, but thank you for the question.
Thank you so much, George, and I love what you have outlined there in that when we're talking about film financing, we must look at it at stages of the life cycle, from point A to point B and to point C. And that takes me to Zianda. Z, you've heard what George has said. Is it true that if you're looking at financing, we should actually articulate it based on the various stages in the life cycle of producing a film? And if so, tell us why.
I think, George, you're right. Which is why, from the KwaZulu-Natal Film Commission's point of view, when we structured our funding to fund various stages of the value chain. So we don't only fund the production. So we fund from the script development. So when we approve a project, we can approve a concept based on potential. So if we see potential of a project, then we'll approve it to go into script development. And so there's like a lot of interventions that we have there. For instance, we have a pool of people that we call script editors who assist in the script development, because when you're working on a project, all you see is just what you want and how you want the film to be like. And sometimes you lose track of that it's supposed to be for audiences. So the script editors will help, in terms of assisting, the filmmaker, assisting the writer to say, okay, so who are you targeting and what kind of story do you want to tell throughout, and they finish the script development phase. And so after that, then you go into production. So we fund the production part of the film, and we also fund the distribution part in 3 parts. Audience development in order for us to cultivate the culture of watching films. As we know, as Africans, it's a sad thing, but it's the truth. We don't really want to watch our content. We consume a lot of Hollywood content. So with that fund, we're really trying to, have people come through to us and with groundbreaking and unique ways of saying, this is how I can bring audiences, to watch the films that you are currently funding. We also have a marketing and distribution fund where once your film has been produced, then you can tell us where you want to take it. But while you are still in script development, we also have a stage there where we say to you, where do you see your film going? That way, by the time you go into production, you already have thought about your target audience, you've already thought about distribution platforms, you've already thought about return on investment. And then the last part is that we also have film markets and film festivals, whereby we take our filmmakers to various platforms like we are here today. We have 2 filmmakers from South Africa who are here, who are looking to collaborate with some of the Kenyan filmmakers. We also have like partnerships with various film festivals all around the world, where we take our filmmakers, for various reasons, like to keep abreast of what's happening in the industry, and to meet distributors, sales people, to meet other producers, to just so that we all make the world just one, so we're not working on silos, and we're all collaborating and making sure that our stories are exported, to make sure that we create universal stories. So when we hear and we watch films, then you get ideas of, oh wow, that film did well, and you want to see why that film did well. So you're able to learn a lot from just other people. So yeah, I think in essence that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll come back to you after we get a few words from Vanessa right now, because we're moving in a very progressive, in a very granular way. George has helped us understand why we need the financing and how the financing will come. And you've highlighted to us that indeed it's important and it's available in stages. But you said one thing, that we don't consume our own content. We are not producing and consuming what we produce. And there is a very big, it's been a very big question, not only in Kenya, not only in East Africa, but in sub-Saharan Africa. And Showmax is answering that question big time. And Vanessa, first of all, well done for answering that question, because you're allowing us to start consuming our content in a way we didn't consume before. So picking up from where Z has left us, and tell us why it was critical for Showmax to find a new strategy of commissioning shows in sub-Saharan Africa.
Thank you so much for the question. I think it's important to understand that the world is looking at Africa at the moment. Things are changing at a rapid pace where people are tired of consuming the same content that they've been consuming for years on end. There's only so many times you can tell a story about a superhero that, encompasses what Superman is, for instance. I think the Wakanda brand, the Black Panther brand did really well in showing the rest of the world that stories with similar narratives, with worldly emotions and views can be told in the African sense, right? So what we've done is that we avidly look for African stories. We cater for the Black market predominantly, and therefore we need to understand that our viewers want to see themselves in a different light. They want to see themselves as superheroes, as CEOs. They want to see themselves happy. We're trying to steer away from the depressive narratives that we've told, and it's been important to tell those narratives, but it's time for us to celebrate ourselves now. The kind of content we look for is untold stories, talkable content, conversation drivers, family affairs, hot topics in media. Social media is a big thing now, so we look at what people are talking about on Twitter, for instance, and with that said, you just need to be very wary that you aren't creating content that dates. We also look for memorable characters, because essentially your character holds the DNA of your show. When you think of your favorite movie, your favorite show, the first thing that comes to mind is your lead character. Unique point of views is also something that we're looking for. And of course, dramatic irony. The audience loves having a godly view of something, right? So when we know something a character doesn't know, we become invested. We become so invested that we almost want to jump into the screen and tell them what to do. But yeah, I think in closing for that question, it is extremely important to realize that we're sitting on a pot of gold as African filmmakers and content creators in terms of the stories we can tell.
Well, thank you so much, Vanessa, for that. And you've told us that you were looking at this thing with a new lens, looking at social media, enabling the young people to tell stories they want to tell. And I want to speak to Epi now, and I saved Epi for last because Epi has been in the trenches, looking for coins, borrowing money, taking out loans, just to be able to make TV shows. And I know sitting here, you are sitting at a place where if you look back and if you look at the future, there is something you'll feel inside you. So just paint for us the picture of how it's been for producers like you and where you feel we are going right now with institutions like KwaZulu-Natal having an interest in East Africa, with our very own George having an Hoover Fund, and what Vanessa has spoken about, Showmax. If you look at where we've come from, do you see a better future for funding and financing in film and TV?
This even judge is laughing at me. It's true, I've been through the trenches. If it's one person who can write a story about producing in this country, I would. And I think I'm the only one who can really. Because it's been a journey, a very challenging one, where by the time we were making films, I don't even think, the only fund that was available was travel fund from Kenya Ford Foundation. So you can actually calculate how many years it's been around. The only fund you could actually access was travel. So you make your film and go to Ford Foundation and maybe get a travel fund to go to a festival. That's the most you could actually access by the time we were starting to make films. So it's been a journey, and yes, as Izzy has said, we've been through with him some of the journeys that I've walked through, where you've borrowed, almost stealing. Thank goodness I didn't, because I'll be in jail. But put in your own money and left some of us in a lot of debt. Being abused even on social media, because you've not paid your artists. I've been through it all. It's been rough. But looking back, that was actually 7 years ago. When I look back 7 years ago, I am sitting here and I'm thinking, if, first of all, we didn't go through that, then I don't think we'd be here. Because there's a journey that you have to go through in life for you to even become better, for you to understand you can look for funding, for you to understand this is actually to produce very smart. So some of it is, it's important to go through the journey for you to know, become actually a smart producer. When I look back now, I see where we are at. We are at a place where I think producers, we are in a very lucky space at this particular time. Why do I say that? It's because now we have more platforms in terms of either broadcast or distribution. By the time we were starting, I remember it was only Mnet then and KBC that you could sell your content to. So if you're not commissioned by Mnet and you don't have a show on KBC, and you remember the shows that were showing on KBC, you're done. Then you had to take the model like George Gashara, where they started the Nest collection and put it on Facebook, and they thought they were crazy. I mean, how do you monetize on that when you put your content on Facebook? But now looking forward, he had to create that platform so that we can actually see that you can actually create content. So where we are at, the platforms that are coming up, like Showmax, for example, it's giving a lot of opportunity for a lot of people to produce their content and put them there. And not only Showmax, we have all the other streaming platforms that are trying to penetrate into Africa, because Africa is becoming the next frontier. Africa is the only place that our stories have really not been told. So everyone is going to be streaming in Africa to tell our stories. That's a good thing and a dangerous thing at the same time. Because we Africans, if we don't organize ourselves and own this content, the rest of the world is coming, it's taking our stories, and they are running with them. So it's a good thing. It's a good thing in one side, and it's a bad thing on the other side. For producers, I'm sure sitting here, I would be like, if anybody came in and asked me to produce content and to put on an international platform, I will do that, because I need to make I need to make revenue. Commissioned or not commissioned. Commission means that they will take the copyright. I will do it. But at the same time, are we thinking as producers, how do we own these stories of ours? How do we own this content that we are not actually going to give away our stories and our content to the rest of the world, and we are left the same place we are in? Because that's a danger. We're going to find ourselves being left in the same spot we are when everything has been exported from Africa.
Thank you. So now that we understand the space we're in, we will now go to discuss this issue of funding in the context of money, because I believe that's what will make sense to a lot of the people in the audience. The price of money is interest. It could be monetary interest, or it could be just the interest whoever is giving you the money has. Now that we established the price of money is interest, and we know that if we're going to fund content, whether for film or TV, it will either be a commission, or it could either be a philanthropic fund that has come to just support a story. What are the avenues of funding? And in those avenues, what are the interests that come with the fund, so that people understand, if I'm going to write to KwaZulu-Natal tomorrow with my story, this is the structure of the interest that we will have. If I'm going to go to Showmax, for example, with my idea, this is the interest that Showmax will have. So that it's clear and people understand when something is a commission, there is this IP issue involved, there is this value return involved. If it's a fund that's coming from either a venture capitalist fund or a philanthropic fund, these are the interest areas involved. And for that, I'll start with UZ, because you see it in KwaZulu-Natal, which is a government agency, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm really happy that this room is also filled with government agencies of Kenya. And ours are a bit polished. If you look at them, you see so please, it's very important for us to come from that. And then George will talk to us about the same from the angle of the private and philanthropic side. And then Vanessa will explain it to us from the angle of commissioning. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. So I think on this one, I'm not only just going to touch on our funding as the KwaZulu-Natal Film Commission. I'd like to represent South Africa on this one. And reason being that because we're a government agency, we have limited funding. So for instance, for our feature films, our maximum is 1.5 million rands to fund, and so we wouldn't expect you to produce your feature film from just that amount. So we encourage filmmakers to apply to us. We also have the National Film and Video Foundation, which is the national funder. They're also a government agency, and we also have the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, and they have their own incentives, and in fact they have like big money. So what then we do is, as the Film Commission, once we find your project in production specifically, we give you time to raise more finances. So we sign the contract with you, and we'll say we'll give you 6 months to approach the other funders and get that funding so you can close finances and you are ready to shoot your film. We won't pay you any money until then, because we don't want, it's taxpayers' money, it's government money, we don't want it wasted. So what we then wouldn't want to do is pay you money, advance money to your project, and then the project is not completed. So once then in that 6 months you have raised all your finances, you then come back to us and you show us your finance plan. You say, okay, I've now received money from the George, and George is going to give me this much money, and so and so and so and so, and that makes my budget. And there's, obviously sometimes people aren't able to, if for instance your budget was like 10 million rands, some people are not able to raise that 10 million rands, maybe they'll fall short and raise 8, but then when you come back to us, we'll say to you, okay, now you had a budget of 10 million, and now you are at 8 million, what's the plan? So if you want close to finance, then you can say to us, you know what, I'm cutting down on locations. I think actually I didn't have to have 10 locations there. I could shoot this and, at various angles and just use one location, put a producer's hat, wear a producer's hat, and also you look at your script and you say, I have to just kill my darlings, and so I'll cut, this part and this part, and so this is how I'm going to make sure that I complete the film. So we have all of those various platforms, but what the Department of Trade and Industry has done is, because sometimes people take advantage because, for instance, our funding is recoupable grant. Only when you've made a profit and you've paid your private investors, then we expect you to pay us back for the bigger amounts. And some of the amounts, like with documentaries and short films, is actually grants, so you don't have to pay it back. And with the Department of Trade and Industry and Competition, it's incentives and it's grants. So what they now have done is, in order for filmmakers not to relax and just say, oh, it's government money, I don't really have to worry about making, money out of it, a profit out of it, they've now put something in place to say, all producers that come to apply for funding from them, they need to have a certain percentage of private funding. So that way, you'll be committed to making sure that you have a return on investment on your film, you make a profit so that you can be able to pay your private investors.
Thank you. So if I hear you correctly, you're simply saying that you can fund projects that are not necessarily South African. A Kenyan producer can apply to the KwaZulu-Natal Film Commission Fund and be considered for partnership with a South African partner?
Okay, so this is how it works. We find South Africans. So if you want to partner with a South African producer, you can either, obviously, we're not the be all and all. You can, with platforms like this, network, you meet people, you can approach them directly, or you can come through us as the Film Commission and say, this is my story, this is what I would like to do, and then we look at your story and then we pair you with a suitable producer. And so we would find that producer. So you have the South African money, you have the Kenyan money. So there's also obviously certain requirements that you need to meet. So for instance, for us, your South African money, you need to spend at least 50% of that in our province, just our money, because we understand, for instance, if you co-producing with UK and they have lots of money, they wouldn't want to spend 50% of their money in your province because they also have their own requirements and they also need to grow the industries and their economy. So, but specifically the South African fund, you need to spend 50% of that. For the Department of Trade and Industry, for instance, one of the requirements is that you need to be shooting in South Africa for 2 weeks. And your budget needs to be 10 million and over. So we just put, requirements like that. But of course, in fact, to just make an example, there is a film that we have funded, but in development with a Kenyan producer. So what we do is, once you show interest and you can show us a script or your concept, we have a fund for locations, because one of the things that we want to do as for our province is to make sure that it's a location of choice. So sometimes it's not just about the co-production, it's also about if you want to shoot your story in our province. So let's say it's a story about Kenya and there's locations that you can find in South Africa that look like Kenya, you can shoot it and shoot it in South Africa, So then what we would do is we would have our location specialists from the Film Commission take you around the province and showing you those locations. And the Film Commission would then be responsible for the funding of that. So it's not just, money for co-productions, but it's also value for money for, other things like that we do for filmmakers.
Thank you. So to just ensure that I understand and everybody understands, money that comes from a government agency primarily is about increasing the economic value of that particular area. That is the interest area for you in funding these projects, to ensure KwaZulu-Natal as a province gets maximum economic input from the projects. It's not about ownership of the project, it's not about profit sharing at the end, but more so about reaping maximum economic returns into the province.
Yes, so we also are very big on IP. So we don't fund any commission content because we want the filmmakers to own the content. Hence we don't fund commission content. But in terms of the story, for instance, if you want to shoot in our province, you would have to talk. Obviously you need to have legal contracts, so that you don't have fights and disagreements and things like that. Now further. So the work that gets done early on, obviously, will be to say, so how much of the IP you have, how much of the other person has on IP, and in terms of distribution, once you've made your profit, what percentage, each a person is going to be reaping out of that. So.
Thank you. Now, Mr. George, let's discuss broadly film financing and then financing in the creative space, not necessarily just film, because all these sectors are interrelated. And from the perspective of where you sit privately, not a government agency, what is the interest area in particular projects that either get financing or get investment opportunities from a fund like the one you run?
Thank you so much for that question, but it has so many layers, so I'll try and skimp. In a Kenyan context, we'd only dream about the South African context, but we're doing great because we have an equivalent empowerment fund by the government of Kenya. So hopefully at a point, you'll realize that Kenya has also evolved, that the public sector is also financing films and film production and film value chain. But that is not the question I was asked. The question I was asked is, what is the investor's interest? And in the last, say, 10 years, I've been involved in setting up 2 funds. The first one is called DOCA Fund, which is a Documentary Africa grant fund, which was financed through a grant from Ford Foundation to support documentary filmmakers to originate and mature ideas. Then they can go and find financing, because we've seen around the world, on Netflix, on platforms, the documentaries have started to become a major genre of expression. And the interest in this facility that we created and that right now has financed over 200 projects since 2018 with small grants of development and so on and so forth, the interest was to create an ecosystem of professional documentary filmmakers, and not just general filmmakers who sometimes make a documentary film in the course of their careers, but who also amplify African stories told from the protagonist's view. And so the money was literally development financing from a philanthropy. And so anyone who wants to get more details, they can check on the website. But they wanted to move social metrics, like women who make films, young people from disadvantaged areas who can tell their own stories, people from marginalized groups who have unique perspectives to offer, and to get the tools to do that. I also founded, together with a couple of friends, a private investment fund, which is a Hever Fund, which we use debt and equity instruments to get commercial value out of viable projects. And so you ask me, where is the money first? I don't think you will ever walk up to Hever and get 100% financing of your film or your film projects. And in film financing, the big question has always been structuring. How do you structure your finance? And I know that's a big word. And so maybe let me use a softer word. What is the waterfall? Who gets money first? And who puts in money first? So I'll give you an example. I made a film in 2017. It was called Tukomacho. We spent about 23 million shillings to shoot a 12-part series, and it was broadcasted on Facebook exclusively, later on NTV and many other distribution platforms. So I ask myself now, in hindsight, how do you advise George to raise the 23 million shillings? But also, how did George raise that 23 million shillings? Back then, I was not as sophisticated as I am right now. My English now can take me to places where I can meet sophisticated people who will give me equity and such things. But back then, we had this unique story, and the unique story is that Kenya had just survived through Goldenberg, and we were almost forgetting that half of our GDP was almost stolen by some very interesting Kenyans. And we wanted to make that story into something relatable. And so we created the storyboard. It was 24 parts. And we realized every part had a social theme. We were dealing with a different social theme. We were dealing with a different type of... I can see some of my actors in the audience. Let me just stand up and be celebrated. Clap hands for people who have earned from me. when we were structuring this film, we realized that there are numerous social objectives that we were dealing. There was a question about gender violence. There was a question about extrajudicial executions. There was a question about this and the other. And so we found people who could champion those ideas, and they could finance. And so at the end of the day, when we looked at the stories we've written in this series, we realized that there were audiences who, if we persuaded them, had interest to put in some money. And by the end of the day, when we did our one-year campaign to raise the 23 million shillings, luckily now Kenya Film Commission can give you the 23 million, and you don't need to spend a year going to different NGOs. I went to all the NGOs and I raised more than 15 million shillings, which was enough to shoot the film, but not pay the payers. And so we could pay the suppliers, we could pay the transport people, but the director, the executive producer, and everyone else who owned the IP was not paid. And so we wanted to find another way to top up. So we talked to Facebook. We told them, you have this new video function. We want to use that video function for film. And they said, we can't give you cash, but we'll give you credit, advertising credit, that you can discount. You sell it, give it to your mother, give it to your church, change it for money, but we have given you value. And so at the end of the day, our project broke even before we pressed play on the camera. So certain ecosystems that we exist in require for you to be ingenious, to look at the resources around you, the tickets or the interest that you can attach to those. And I'll stop there about ingenious. But now let's come to commercial financing. What would George tell George 2017? How would I structure the resource? I imagine that there's the money and time I've put in. That's equity. And sometimes it's through cash, sometimes it's the car that I was driving to drop so and so. That is my equity. And equity is we never calculate it because we are doing passion. But in other more sophisticated ecosystem, equity is calculated. The second is credits and grants. If you go to ecosystems that have film credits, they tell you if you spend 100 shillings here, and you prove it with a receipt, we'll give you 30 shillings back, cashback guarantees. I know our friends at KFC are trying to create an incentives program, and I hope they get one before we are all old, and our audience is already advising us. There's debt. Api has talked about debt. Sometimes you know that your budget, you need to hire lorries and things and machines. Sometimes Api decides I'll buy it instead of renting it out. So you can get a debt component to finance some things. So if you look at your entire structure, from equity to credits to debt to grants, you've already financed your full film. How does a person like George Gashara look at that structure and say that this structure is something I can put money back into? And I've done to more than 5 big film projects in this country. You look at not the supply side, the demand side. Who is buying? Are there pre-sales? Do you have another catalog of work that already earns you? How much will you share of what you already earn outside of this film? If this film fails, if you want to sell it to Netflix and they don't buy it, is there someone else who you can sell it to? And do you have relationships with that person? So you have a redundancy plan. So if Api came and told me, I have this Mnet show called, I won't mention it, this Mnet show, and I've been commissioned, but if they don't pick it, I know NTV will buy it at this price. And so she can come and say, I have a track record of this, I have this equipment, I have done this, I only need 10 million shillings. And in the 10 million shillings, I'll give you preference shares. That every time we get income, after we pay debts, you're the first one to get at this percentage. So film financing is an issue of structuring. Is looking at all the resources that you could gather and arranging them and saying, let's start with the cheapest money first. as we go to expensive money later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, George and Vanessa. You're the big money in the room right now, Showmax. We've heard from government agency and how they fund. George has articulated very well how private funding and private equity works. We would like to hear from a commissioning perspective, where a broadcaster is spending money to commission content. What is in it for them? What should our filmmakers and content creators be aware of as they explore these three options of funding that are available? Thank you.
Thank you. So at MultiChoice and Showmax, we view our relationships with creatives not as through an authoritative approach, but rather as a partnership. So we have a couple of options for producers and creatives. It's either we commission, it's a full-on commission, or a license agreement, which is around 3 years, could be more depending on the agreement, or you could go the pre-sales route where you do seek funding from places like the KwaZulu-Natal Film Commission or the National Film and Video Foundation, and then we contribute a large percentage towards that. So what the value then is for us is, I'll start with commissions, right? We can commission titles from anything between 2 million to 80 million, sometimes even more. And as an entity, we have to then look at what value that brings us, right? And what value it brings for the industry. First of all, the producers are taking home a lot of money, which can then fund other projects that they may have. And with licensing, you can still make a large percentage of money, but then own your IP if that is what you want as a creative. And I know I was on the other side of the line because I produced and directed for over 10 decades before I joined MultiChoice and Showmax. And sometimes you do want to own your IP, so you do have that option. The pre-sales route as well, then you can own a portion of your IP, right? So that way both parties get a return on their investment.
I will come back to Vanessa. There is a small connection issue there, but as we wait for her to join back, Epi, the conversation on these sources of money, commissioning, and what we've discussed, you are a living example. You've got shows that have been commissioned, you found money from private investors, you found money from grants and government agencies, all of it. What are the greatest lessons you would give the audience today in this hierarchy? Commissioning, good and bad, debt, good and bad, and grants, good and bad.
That's a lot of homework. Commissioning. What are the advantages of commissioning? First of all, as a producer, I'm not risking anything in terms of money. The broadcaster is risking 100%. Another advantage, I don't have to go to George, to have a fund, to KwaZulu-Natal to look for money. Because funding takes a while. By the time a film is done, you're looking at 5 to 10 years, having knocked different doors to just get funding, even, to knocking different doors to get funding. So then I don't have to do that journey. The downside to commissioning is you don't own your IP. So if you're looking at 10 years from now, when you see that show, actually, TV is very interesting. It's a show you could have done like 7 years, and then 7 years later, the show becomes a hit and becomes such a big thing. So as a producer, you not earn from that. But at least, I always tell young people who come to me and say, I have a great idea, but the broadcaster wants to commission it. And they want to hang on to that idea. My first advice is, if you do not have a catalog, get it commissioned. Because how do people know you? How do people know that you can produce or you can direct such a content? So get it commissioned, because it's somebody else who is taking the risk. So that's the first advice I usually give people. If you get anybody who wants to commission. You are a creative, you will come up with another idea.
Thank you, Epi. I'll pin you because Vanessa is back on the line so she can conclude our conversation on the options that are there from a broadcaster like Showmax. Please, Vanessa, carry on.
Thank you. I'm not too sure where you lost me.
We lost you at the point where you were telling us about the option of either pre-sale or commissioning or licensing.
Yes, so you have those three options. Commissioning is 100%. So you get to walk away with a large percentage of money, which you can then infiltrate into your other productions, should you choose. If you do feel that you want to own your IP, that is also a choice that you know we champion. So we essentially license the film for 3 years, and then the IP goes back to you. There's also certain agreements that can be made so that you can showcase these films at festivals, should you choose. And then we have the pre-sales route, which obviously you own a percentage, and then the company owns the percentage of it as well. We do contribute a large percentage of the funds when it's pre-sales, and then producers can obviously seek funding from establishments such as film commissions, the National Film and Video Foundation, and other platforms. But essentially, we provide these options because we see our relationship with creatives as a partnership instead of a dictatorship.
Okay, thank you. So you've all heard from Vanessa, it's not only a commissioning option, those three options are also available from them. Now, we've spoken about money, and there are channels to get your projects financed. But the bigger question now that we want to dive into is, where is the market? Your show can get commissioned, you could get money from George, KwaZulu-Natal could fund you, but who is going to watch your film? In the context of Kenya and East Africa, do we have a market that's galvanized, that is ready to consume, so that there is return on investment at any different level for anybody who decides to invest in content? Kenya has a population of about 55 million. You look at Tanzania, you're talking about 60 million. Uganda, 40 million. Rwanda, Burundi together is about 25. South Sudan, 10. DRC, Congo, 90. So looking at the greater East Africa, you're talking about a population that is almost the population of the United States of America. It's 330 million people, which is a whole market that needs to consume content. So it looks like we've sorted out the problem of where the funds will come from and how they come, whether it's a commission, whether it's a pre-sale, whether it's private equity borrowing, etc. But how then do we have a route to market guarantee of the content we produce? Is it an area that needs focus so that if Showmax today is commissioning a show in Kenya, they can go back and say, wow, the numbers that are coming back from the viewership are very high. What should we do, and what should we think? In which space should we operate in to ensure that the value of the content we're producing is fit enough for consumption? This is in response to what you said, Z, that we are consuming a lot of external content and not so much what we are producing. But it's evident now that with funds from government agencies, philanthropic organizations, and broadcasters, the finance to produce the good content is there. But do we have a galvanized market that will consume that content? And if we do, well and good. I personally don't think we have, and I think there's work to be done there, also in financing. How do we tap financing into galvanizing a market to consume what we are producing?
Is the question for me?
Yeah.
Okay. I think there's work that needs to be done, obviously. But also, I think it really depends on the stories that we're telling. I know, for instance, that currently there is this format called Date My Family that started in South Africa. And because it was so popular in South Africa, there's Date My Family Nigeria, there's Date My Family Kenya, there's, okay, I haven't seen other ones, there's probably more. But because of, the format, and it's entertaining, it's informative, you get to learn other people's cultures. So I think stories like that are, stories that we can, like I said, again, exporting our culture. So you watch Date My Family in South Africa, and then you're thinking, oh, okay, so this is how South African lives, and then live, and then you watch Date My Family Kenya, and it's like slightly different because of the nuances, and I think stories like that. And I know in South Africa now we've started focusing on those kind of stories that will garner more audiences. I mean, there's like this big series that was like watched by almost everyone. It's about a church. Who would have thought, So there's this church, like big church in South Africa, that no one actually really knows what happens at the church. So what they did is like they kind of, like put a camera in there, to just educate people on actually this is what happens. And because there's been always like this interest of what is this church about and all of these myths about the church, so a lot of people are watching it. So I think really it's about the stories that we watch, and we're producing, and I think if we produce stories that will garner audiences, we will get those audiences. But again, we still do need to do a lot of work. Like I said earlier, we, as the Film Commission, for instance, we have structures like and programs like audience development. We want to cultivate a culture of watching films. So there's quite a lot that needs to be done. It's not helping that even the streaming platforms that are coming into Africa are still not African streaming platforms, if I may. But I think we are a work in progress, and I think very soon we're going to be coming up with groundbreaking streaming platforms for Africa, where Africans will be consuming African content.
Okay, thank you. So I'll come back to you, Epi. You were conversation on what are the advantages and disadvantages, if any, of the three financing routes that we've discussed today. There was commissioning, there was borrowing and stealing with debt, and then there was grants and funds.
Thank you. I think I'd already answered that on commissioning. On borrowing, stealing, debt, do not get there. Unless you want to find yourself in hospital. On there's pre-licensing. It's a very tricky model because it's a model I've tried. I've actually gone for the two models, which is commissioning and pre-licensing. Pre-licensing is where you sell the idea to a broadcaster. They give you a percentage of the money for you to go to produce, and they have a license period of a certain time of years. I'll use my own experience to explain this. So when I did my first pre-licensing, because I'd done so much commissioned work, then I thought I was a genius, so I can get into this place where I will make my own content, have my IP, sell it, and make millions of shillings. That's what got me into so much debt. But what happened is I did not look at the business module then very carefully. What pre-licensing meant at that particular time is I will get money, borrow money from a bank. Most likely the broadcaster will give me half the money. I will produce, I will license it to the broadcaster. But the catch was the licensing period. By that particular time when you were licensing the content, it was 2 years. So imagine you've borrowed money from a bank, and maybe you borrowed from your relatives or it is your own savings. You will have to wait for 2 years before you are able to resell that content for you now to start paying your bank loan. Remember that bank loan is already incurring interests at that particular time. So that's what caught us in some of those areas that we really didn't want to get ourselves. It's because at that particular time we did not understand what licensing is, licensing period, and things like that. Fast forward, the young AP in 2017, and now what I would advise her, yes, to still go for pre-licensing because it's good to own your IP because you can continue selling your content for many years, but the licensing period is what you look at. So be smart enough to look at the terms and conditions in the contract. So if if you look at the licensing period, for example, on a 13-part series, a very reasonable time to give a licensing period is like 6 months to a year. Within 6 months to a year, if you've borrowed money or you've borrowed a loan, you can find a way of structuring your loan or your debt structure in such a way that you start paying from 6 months. Then you look at the contract again and break it down to different elements. So if you're pitching to people like Mnet, what you do, you don't give your entire IP away. You give your IP for TV. Then you give your IP for Showmax, for example. So they pay two licenses at the same time because those are two different platforms. So those are the things now you look at in terms of your contract. Then when you look at those terms, then you find that in your first sale, most probably you have actually sold the amount of money you spent on the content. So that once you do your second sale, then you're able to pay your loan. Second thing you need to do is have a second buyer. Already have an interest to the second buyer, so that by the time this licensing period is over with Showmax, you have somebody like, I'm using names we know, we have somebody like StarTimes who've already signed up and are ready to take it over. With that, then, you can even tell your financiers that already have another contract in place. You're guaranteeing yourself a second license, because by the time you're done with your second license, you've made your money back. So those are the terms I would look at in the pre-licensing at this particular time. I've not tried the other module of co-owning with a broadcaster, so I would not really talk about that module at this particular time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Very insightful, and I believe what you are simply saying is commissions are good. Build your catalog, do them. Be smart enough to see how they will blow up your plans, not just for what has been commissioned, but for what you have in store. Pre-sales, you have to have the right mind and the right attitude to approach it. Okay, asante sana. So now that we have this new thing called streaming, the internet has taken over exhibition platforms for our content. People are not going to cinema. I personally haven't been to any cinema since 2020, COVID came. I've not been into a cinema hall. I don't know if any one of you or in the audience you've been, but I can guarantee you the frequency of going to the cinema has gone down. We are consuming content on device or at home through various platforms. There's Showmax, there's Netflix, there's Amazon, and they are all on their way to Africa right now. The way I look at it, not to be quoted by anybody, this is for purposes of this conversation, it's like a new scramble for Africa. The same way it happened in the 1800s when it was Germans wanted this side, the British wanted this side. If you look at the digital DSP platform wars, it's very similar to that. It's some sort of neo-colonialism that's coming back. But we are not prepared for that, because today, if somebody is going to give you $1 million to do a show, a lot of our young filmmakers and TV producers will focus on the amount of money that's being offered. But 3 years down the line, you find yourself with an amazing piece of content that you did that's not earning you money anymore, and you have nothing to show for yourself. How do we mitigate the young filmmakers in the audience so that they can be able to understand that filmmaking is a business, that you need to have not just the creative understanding of it, but the business understanding of things, so that as these opportunities come, they also approach it with caution. So it's like giving them advice on how to approach the future that is fast approaching. And I'll start with you, Vanessa, because you sit at a place where right now your name is very popular in the content space in Kenya. Everybody wants to send a proposal to Showmax. So, but what would you be able to advise, to give as a piece of advice to the young filmmakers and content creators in Kenya as we are getting into these digital wars that are quickly coming into the African space?
I think you raise a really good point about creating content is not just about what you're creating, but you actually need to think about how you're creating it, how you're selling it, and what the industry trends are, right? First, I'll speak on your financing history. As a broadcaster, we look at your tax records. We have internal teams that actively look through your company's credentials, their financing history, whether or not you're tax compliant. So before you approach a broadcaster, ensure that your books are in order. Otherwise, we won't do business with you, because it just it's a risk to the business. Essentially, it's a risk to yourselves as well. And then, just in terms of selling to us, you need to know what's happening, industry trends, right? What's happening on the ground, what's happening around you. For instance, if someone in Kenya wants to sell to South Africa or do a co-production, what are the linking threads that makes your concept sellable in both areas, or in South Africa, for instance? Because when creating something, it's important to consider the world, right? But when creating stories, you look at the human factors, you look at emotions. We all cry about things like female empowerment or family dynamics. So you can use a theme to target an audience that's not necessarily from the same area as you. It's the human experience that essentially makes your concept resonant and relatable.
Thank you so much. George, I know this is an area where the layers are many, but very quickly, what would you tell this guy on the business side of things? They've conquered the ability to show that they can create, but we haven't yet seen a generation of content creators, not just in Kenya, but in the entire sub-Saharan space, who actually understand the business. You would count them and they wouldn't get to 15. So what's a piece of advice you'd give for the young upcoming content creators in the area of film business?
Young upcoming film content.
I've worked out a number.
Yes.
You spoke about 7 years ago.
Yes.
So I'm calculating young and upcoming. These are people who will need about 5 years to get to where you are in terms of understanding the creative business. So using the term
someone entering.
Someone entering, entry point.
I have a lot of hope and excitement for this generation of creators, more than my own generation. The reason I say this is that they enter a market in a time that tools are more accessible, stories have been decentralized, audiences have already, in one way or another, been put in silos. I'll give you an example. I'm a bee farmer. I watch jokes and memes about bee farming on TikTok. You don't know how many. I've met over 7 content creators around bee farming that I can scroll until evening that you've never watched. Some of them are from Somalia and some of them are from Meru, and that stuff is hilarious. So audiences have already been segmented, tools are more readily available, and opportunities to put a till between content and the audience are starting to come up. I personally have financed 3 distribution platforms in Kenya that are already in the market for microtransactions. So already, if someone knows has a podcast, they can get 20 shillings on M-Pesa for microtransaction, so they do not have to wait the 15 years that API took to be able to properly commercialize. That's a path that's available, but the competition is ludicrous. And so you have to spend a lot more time to creating content, so you cannot be lazy. I'll give them an example of Mamito. I don't know if anyone knows Mamito. Anyone by a show of hands? I don't know who writes her content, but she's got something magical about how she sees the world and how she operates within the world, and she offers that as a unique perspective and puts a till at every point. And for her journey will be faster than mine. So I think someone entering the ecosystem at this point has very unique advantages that we do not have. But what is important is you need to know your path early and to start building on it. I'll give you an example. I knew back 9 years ago that I wanted to handle 1 billion shillings at a point. I knew that I wanted it. I didn't know at what point. Luckily, I've already handled it. It's now in my past. But from the first year of our registration, we had an audit statement. So for my company, from the first year, there was an audit statement. To 9 years later, you can track all our money. I knew early that because we are creating IP, that we needed to know how to manage who owns what, because people come in, people go. My business partners came in, they've left. I've left some of the companies that I've done. So from us beginning, we started to have very high standards of managing our rights. So right now I can sell to you the catalog of work that I have because all the rights are very well managed and that we know who earns what at what point. I know June is here. Please go to her. She will help you with your business. She's an IP lawyer. So you start to imagine where you could be and start putting in the small steps. And how I realized that those actually matter is that every time there was due diligence, I passed. And many people had greater ideas than I did, but they were on that other side. Oh, I don't have that document. Oh, I didn't pay KRA. Oh, I didn't do that. So you have to choose your path early, and you have to start to create the systems. I'm a black guy who's barely 35, and I've been able to raise more resources than any person in my clan. Any person in my clan, even my great-grandfather would be proud of me. He'd be like, how did you manage this? I have surprised myself. And so what I'm trying to inspire that person is that think about this path that you want to be. Have mental images of that, and then start to model those. There's a great number of people who are here listening to Api. Api is a business mogul. You would never otherwise meet her. But because you're here, you can ask her after this, what were those 3 things that my business should do? And you take those seriously. I have climbed my business, but on the backs of many of you who are here, I'd say, okay, tell me, how do you manage music rights? How do you manage this and that? And when I got money, I paid good dollars to people who know stuff, and they helped me structure. So I think building the foundation of your business will allow you to compete with people who are more talented than you, but do not have that structure, because money flows through structure. Money goes where risk is limited. Final story. 3 years ago, a big music company, global, walks into my office and their representatives. They want to buy a music catalog, and now we're moving a bit from film, we're going to another sector. And they asked me, how many music labels have you invested in? We want to meet them so that we can be able to create a path for the work that they've created. And you can use this for your sector. And so I gave them numerous options and said, this one is Zilizopendwa, this one is Mbwegze, this one, whatever. And only one person was able to be bought. And they were a 3-year-old business. And a big check was signed, and my debt was paid as part of that check. And everyone else, they looked at them, and they were like, this guy publishes music for the last 15 years, but he's the producer, he's the guitarist, he's the vocalist, he's the whatever in this catalog. Those are terrible business practices that will expose the person trying to buy your catalog to legal risks. So you were either thinking that you're benefiting yourself by trying to get all these names written out, your drum person, you removed them, the guitar person, you removed them, you put your wife, you put your cousin. You're thinking you're benefiting yourself, but you're limiting your potential for growth. Where it should start is that you should think of yourself as a legitimate business that will grow, that one day can be bought off. And if you can have that mentality from the beginning, then you're conditioning yourself to this new economy. And this new economy is a financialized economy that a company is a commodity that can be bought, that can be traded, and that's where the new money is. That even today, I hope that someone in this audience will come and say, I want to buy Hiva Fund because they have a good catalog of businesses they've invested in, they've managed their money well, and they come and give me 100 million. I go to the farm and they continue running the business instead of starting afresh. So you have to think of your business, your music belonging to the business, your film belonging to the business, and the business itself as a commodity that can be traded and given to someone else. That would be my advice.
Haya, mmesikia? Asiyesikia haambiwi, hiyo hamjui. Okay, thank you so much, George, and very insightful remarks there. I'm a producer myself. I have my own story which I'll not share today, but but I completely agree with what you have said.
Maybe we can ask you a question. He's an outstanding filmmaker. Maybe he can tell us how did it end up there, asking us these questions, because he's a great person that we respect. Let them benefit from your knowledge.
I'll tell you one thing. Imagination is what got me where I am. And I believe that imagination is the preview to life's coming attractions. I imagined being in a place where I have a pool of filmmakers around me and we run a business called Film Queen Africa where all of us come, congregate, and build content. And we've done it for the last 10 years. And where I am right now, I feel like I need to participate more in growing the creative economy wholesomely, not just the single sector of film. And that's why you're not seeing me producing anymore or releasing anything, but people who are associated to me and the business are doing it. My biggest challenge that I've given myself right now, between now and the next 10 years, is to ensure that Kenya has a ministry of the creative economy. Whatever it will take, that is my next billion. The day it's launched and the day we have a minister and the day I know all the subsectors, whether it's film, music, art, have been departmentalized into a ministry, I'll have achieved my next 10-year decade. So that's what I am focusing on now. To carry on, I'd like to get closing remarks from our lovely ladies. And there's something that's happening in the space of film. And please don't misunderstand me if I use the wrong words, but women are conquering and they're making us so proud. Look at our panelists today. Vanessa is a lady. Look at AP. Look at V. Look at our very own Lupita. If you go to Netflix, how many Kenyan ladies are there? It's an amazing time. So let's give a round of applause for African women who are making film and TV work. And I'll ask them to all give us closing remarks, encourage the young filmmakers who are here, and let them not fear thinking of film as a business. And I'll start with you, AP, and then we'll go to V, and then we'll close with Vanessa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ezekiel. And I have known you for 20 years, and I know you're going to do it. You're going to make sure that this Kenya film, we get it's coming. I know that. Thank you so much for having me on this panel. For me, I would tell the young people, the upcoming, they were called upcoming. They were called upcoming. George, what were they called? Them. I would tell them, you're very lucky. You're getting to a space where you have various platforms for you to create content. We didn't even have that opportunity. When we started, we couldn't even speak to somebody like Vanessa, even if it's online. You know, she's online, you cannot see her, but getting hold of somebody like Vanessa was almost impossible for you to be able to do that. And I know right now you can actually walk in Showmax office, Mnet office, or start any office and actually be able to see anyone. So you're very lucky that you're in that spot. You have different platforms you can be able to actually go and nurture your talent. Don't wait to be employed by production companies. Create content. Create content and put it out there. And like Georgia said again, even if you're creating content on TikTok and anything, put structures into place. As much as I said I ended up at some point in debt, I even registered that debt in my books. You know, you register that debt in your books, and when you even go look for fund, I'll not even say and they do due diligence. They find there's a debt in it, and I still got money. So again, put structures into place where you run it as a business. My dream when I started Zamaradi is, I'd come from a marketing background, and for me, I kept feeling, these guys always talk, we are doing business like passion, yeah? You can never really eat passion. So I decided I wanted to set up a business that was a business, because I'd come from a place of marketing and I could see things were done in a particular structured way. So when I set up Zamaradi, it was basically that. So as when you're doing your TikToks, you're doing that, put your structures into place and look at it as business. I'm always saying it's like a banking job. It's an 8 to 5 job. Let's not look at it as creative, like it's not a business. It's a business. When you look at it as a business, then we will find ourselves being able to progress to the next level. And let's keep telling our African stories. We have a lot of stories. Let's keep telling them. Thank you.
From my side, I'd like to say, don't listen to the naysayers that say it can be done. If you can think it, you can do it. And also, just something else. I know sometimes as creatives, we want to focus on just the concepts and the stories and not the business side of film. And I think you must look at your strengths. If your strength is producing and you need someone else to direct or you need someone else to do other things for your business, please do that. Film is not a one-man show. I know sometimes when I say this, people are always like, yeah, but Tyler Perry would direct and write and act and do whatever in his films. And I said, yeah, but he wasn't doing everything else behind the scenes. He still was partnering with other people. So film is a partnering sport, so partner with people who have experience in the industry, who've done it. Talk to people who will advise you about finance. The sky's the limit, there's so much out there. I mean, who would have thought that now, like, people can spend a whole day watching TikTok? You know, like if someone had said that like 5 years ago that that's what we'd be doing, you know, we would say, maybe not. Anyway, there's something that, you know, someone said in one of the sessions that I attended previously that really stuck with me, that the future is closer than we think. Don't just think that, oh, maybe, you know, we'll do it then, we'll do it, because if you're thinking it and you're not doing it, someone else is thinking it and doing it, and it will happen soon. All the best to everyone. I always say hats off to filmmakers. It's not an easy industry. It's a lot. Like, I mean, it's long hours of grinding. It's a lot of problems with people, sometimes, you know, crew members that will give you all the, you know, troubles. Cast members that won't show up on set, but you know, we see all the stories done. When your story is done, we know what you've gone through. It's quite a lot, and I'm really say, you know, I always say that I really admire filmmakers, and I admire the perseverance, you know, from people who've done it in the past. And in closing, I'd like to say congratulations to Kalasha for your milestone of being in your 5th year. And please keep it up. We really need, you know, these partnerships from South Africa. We are here because we really would like to have one Africa, and just all of us work together, put our heads together. And I think when we do that, we'll do a lot. You know, we'll go far. Thank you.
Thank you very much, V. And Vanessa?
Thank you very much. There's so much I'd like to say, but in the interest of time, I'll keep it brief. But I think as African creators, we need to understand that we are global contributors. Don't look at yourself as the small fish in the pond. We are essentially the prize right now. We have so many stories to uncover, and our continent is like an onion, you know. The more you peel away, the more there is, and that's the richness that the rest of the world is looking for. So never undersell yourself. Know that you are the prize. Don't be afraid to dream. Dream big and plan small. By plan small, I mean look at every single detail you'll need to accomplish that dream. I mean, I know the other panelists have spoken about treating your work as a business. That is very important. Get your financial record straight. Know who you want to sell to, know what you're getting yourself involved in, and never, eliminate the risk of being taken advantage of. Also, don't be afraid to ask for help. We have all gotten here through some form of help or another, it's not a one-man journey. And I think Ziyanda put it very well, where she said we are looking to be one Africa, and collaboration is key. So reach out to us, reach out to the rest of the African continent. I will refrain from saying the world because for too long we've been told that we have to look to the world to educate us and to help us. And I really am of the strong belief that we have more than enough minerals and power to do it ourselves. So yeah, thank you and good luck. And thank you to the Kalasha film and TV market for having me today. Thank you to my fellow panelists. And yeah, I hope to see you very soon.
Thank you, Vanessa. Please stay on the line. I would now like to invite the audience to ask questions. And after the Q&A, we shall wrap it up. And I'll be very structured with the questions so that we don't spend too much time on that section. So is there anybody who has a question for our very lovely panelists? I can see one hand there. Is there another one? Okay, if we could pass a microphone to that gentleman, please.
Hi, my name is Arafat Mu from Swahili Port Hub Foundation based in Mombasa. And I'm directing this question to George. Could you please guide me on the economics of setting up, say for example, a fund like Hiva Fund? Because I've studied venture capital, say for example. Let me give a story. A student from university drops out. He wants to start the next M-Pesa. Goes, gets a fund somewhere, let's say maybe it's 10 million, and that particular VC firm, venture capitalist firm, says, okay, we need 100x return in 7 years. So we're giving you 10 million today, we need 100 million in 7 years. That is upon exit, right? So for the case of Hiva Fund, like what is the return? Like how do you return back your investment and what is the multiple?
It's a very difficult question, considering even me, I don't know. But I'll say something that's useful to all of us. Private money. Private money is money belonging to someone else, and sometimes you need it because you need to grow your own business. And so I don't know those things. I have hired amazing people who talk about multiples and gross this, gross the other. But the truth of the matter is that another person's money, whether they saved it, whether they inherited it, whether they made money from a good business and then they have a pot somewhere, for you to get it, you have either, if they're not there, your parent or your sponyo. Kenyans know what a sponyo is. We won't expose the South Africans to it. Your sponsor. There's a return expectation. Now, to those people who go to the market, to people you don't know, you go to an office, it is in town, you've seen it on a billboard, you go and talk to the receptionist, he says go to that room and fill those forms. Those people have already thought about what they want, how they want them to give the money, and they're regulated somehow. So in the regulated market, there's things that are competing with you as a stranger who has a good idea. If I have money, I could take it to buy a plot of land. I could take it to the stock exchange. I could take it to money markets. I could take it to other places. And right now, Nairobi Stock Exchange earns us 17% per annum. So if you're coming to me and I like to invest in the stock exchange, you have to tell me that your money will come up with more than the stock exchange, but with other things, that there'll be stories that will be told, there'll be people who will be employed. So you have to always think about the interest of the person whose money you want, and what opportunity they are forfeiting to give you the money. And so that is something that you always have to think about. So I'll give you 3 options. So this gentleman from Swahili Port can go to the SACCO. He has saved money for 4 years, and in the SACCO you can borrow 3 times above the money you have saved at 12% per annum. That is the cheapest market money in the country right now. And so if you don't have a SACCO, what is keeping you from borrowing from a SACCO is time. You need time to save enough. If you want to shoot a film for 5 million, so you need to save 750,000 or 750,000, so you can borrow 3 times. So it's time that you're trading. And if you don't have that time, you look for another option. You go to the bank. The bank have their money. They've taken money from everyone, but they can lend you only if you have security that you can guarantee that you will return. So if you don't have a car, if you don't have a guarantor, if you don't have security to guarantee that you can take someone else's money, then you look for another option. The option where I sit is the person who has someone else's money but is interested in your sector, but that other person behind me, for me, I have investors from Europe, from wherever. They want Africans to do business so that they don't cross the transatlantic, but they also want their money back. So already I have borrowed, or I have an expectation for the money that I hold. So if he comes to me and says your money is expensive, I say go save, or go to KFC. So every money, and I say this, every money has a tribe, and every vernacular of money has an expectation. So venture capital is a very small percentage of the money that's available in the ecosystem that you can use. And so I always tell people, venture capital money is not your first money. It is usually the most expensive option in the market. There are other ways to fill your pocket, your kiondo or gorogoro, before you go to Hiva Fund. But for us, because we have development objectives, I go to Api when she has made good money. I tell her, that 10 million that you made from that film, give me 5, and I'll return it in 5 years, and it will be 7 million. And I go to someone else, and I ask them for money. I build a pot of money that has a return expectations. For every 5 minutes I keep this money, I'm already paying someone. So you come to me, my money is already expensive. And that's why I encourage people, go to places where you can get cheap money fast. If you can go to your chama and tell them, my son is a filmmaker, put your changa money there, that is cheap money. The only thing it costs you is your esteem and your English. If you can go to your SACCO, it is your time and your savings. So explore cheaper money before you go to more sophisticated, expensive money in the ecosystem. So that would be my submission to you. But yes, we are profitable and we manage people's money and we return it on time. And if you have some, I can manage it for you. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Any other questions from the audience? Yes. This gentleman with glasses here. And any others? Because I'll take only 2 more after him, so there'll be him and him. There's no lady who has a question?
Hi, my name is Asi. My question is to Vanessa. How do we reach out to Showmax if you want to discuss pre-sales or licensing deals?
So we do have a portal available on our multi-choice site, which is multichoice.com. On this portal, you're given guidelines on how to submit your concept. And obviously when you submit it, there's privacy, I lose the word, but permissions. So we can't use the concept. It's regulated, right? Unless we choose to commission it. Thereafter, we'll contact you to pitch to us should your concept be something we're looking for. Once that pitch is done, our panel will decide whether we want to commission the title or not, and we move forward thereafter through signing contracts, allowing budget, giving you the support that you need.
Thank you very much for that answer. The gentleman over there.
Thank you. My name is Kim. I'm a video editor with Flight Creatives. Question to AP. In this conversation, you've talked about creating a structure and planning the pre-production, production, and post-production process, including marketing and understanding your audience segmentation. So when you're planning for all this, do you leave room for any changes? And when factors change, like when we had the onset of COVID-19, as a producer, when you're planning for these things, how do you create room for flexibility? And when something unprecedented like COVID happens, how do you adjust your plan or your structure to accommodate changes in consumption, audiences, and all that? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very good question. So basically what you do when you're doing your planning for all the different stages of production, what you do, you have to leave room for adjustments because there's nothing definite. So even when you're signing up a contract, we have something like, now the other day I was corrected, I was told it's not pronounced like that, like force majeure. Major. So I was corrected that. I used to say force majeure, but now it's major. So we have something like that always gets you because you can never really predict what is there. So when you do our budget, what we usually do, from development, anything can change, the story can change. So as a producer, you have to be very flexible to allow the change of story. Pre-production, anything could happen, you could either extend, and during pre-production is now where you're creating your schedules. So when you're creating your schedules, you always have to have contingency days in terms of in scheduling. So for example, if I'm going to shoot for a 10-day, I will always have a 4-day contingency day. Anything can happen. So when I'm signing up people, I have my 4-day contingency. In your budget, you always create a 10% of your total budget. It goes to contingency, and that money you're not supposed to touch until you really necessarily need to touch it. So when you're budgeting, you do a 10%. When it comes to marketing and distribution, anything would happen. If I fast forward, and during COVID time, it was a very difficult time for us because COVID happened and shut down, and there's no way a crew member will work alone. You need a team of people to work together. So we shut down for a week. But then after a week, we realized we can go back and tell the audience, sorry, there's COVID, you guys are not going to enjoy the show. So we realized here we have to be smart enough, and how do we actually get back into production? So it's when we realized the government has given a regulation where we can work 15 people. We realized that's where our loophole is. So what we did, we looked at the scenes where we had 2 characters, and then we looked at the crew members and reduced our crew members to 15 people. So the total number on set, including the actors, were actually 15. And then we put in the measures that were there. So you have a nurse, you have a washing area, but then only 1 week. You can actually only afford to have less than 15 people on a film set for only 1 week. After a week, you've exhausted the scenes that you only have 2 characters. So then within that 1 week, we realized we have to be smart again. You look at the loopholes within the law and the system, because that's where you are a producer. We realized, wait, there's another loophole here. What do? We went in to Nairobi area. That time, remember, we used to have a permit to allow you to have a barrier. We decided we were going to look for a permit to film. And then we realized actually entertainment is an essential service. So we got a letter from GoTV that said that entertainment is an essential service. So when everybody else was lining up to go get a permit for Barrio, we were there with them to get a permit. So we submitted our letters, and we didn't even put a limit to the number of people. We said, let's leave it blank because the system always has a loophole somewhere. I think the people reading didn't really understand what we were talking about because we use jargons of we are essential services, the show is on air, people have to watch, people at home, they need to be entertained. We got a stamp. And during COVID, at the heat of COVID, we did a wedding sequence, which had 50 people. When we took our letter to the OCS in Kikuyu, the OCS in Kikuyu was like, who are you people? How is it that you've been able to be given a permit without a limit of number of people? We just kept quiet. So you look at loopholes within your system as well. You have to be very smart as a producer. You look at, if they even put a regulation and say you cannot film, they put a regulation you cannot film at night. We realized, okay, you can't film at night. So how do we do it? What we did, we went back to our scripts and rewrote everything to be daytime. So all our sequences were supposed to be night, became day. So you have to be very flexible with the times, and you cannot be rigid as a producer. And it's, we've worked a lot with Easy, and it's being flexible in the seconds, not even in the minutes, in the seconds, because you could be sitting, somebody will come and say, this is what is happening, you have to be flexible and make a change immediately where you are. I hope I've answered.
The last question was the gentleman at the corner there.
Hi. So my question is still addressed to AP. What would be your advice? My name is Oso, I'm a filmmaker. What would be your advice to independent filmmakers when it comes to film valuation, and what percentages to give to the executive producers? Because we've seen like independent filmmakers being exploited so much, and they actually don't know their rights, so-called rights, yeah.
Wow, that's a very difficult one. I like it though. George, you're an executive producer. Ezekiel will help me a bit on that. I will also I'll actually answer that with a question. How much did the executive producer put into your film project? If I'm going to invest 100% into your film project, and you of course you can equate your, like George was speaking and saying, we need to start putting our cost on equity in terms of the time you spent on creating the show, the time the story itself, you need to budget for that and put a fee to that, the time you spent. When you do that, the time you spent yourself, what is a percentage that the executive producer has put in? Then the percentage the executive producer has put in, if it's more than you, then they own you. They own the project. So as at that particular time as a producer, you really don't have time. So that's why we said when you start putting your paperwork in place, or you start budgeting or putting costs on the time you're spending as a filmmaker, because it's a passion, yes, but let's not treat it as a passion. Let's treat it as a business. So from day one, when you had the idea, start costing that. So by the time you're meeting with the executive producer, you have a cost element to the time you spent to write the story, to develop the story, because you spend a lot of time. You spend time talking to people, you spend time researching. All that is costed. Cost that. So by the time you're meeting your executive producer, you already have put in money into your own project. Then when you're sitting on the table, you have a negotiation. You can be able to negotiate. But the percentage depends on how much the executive producer has put in. Ezekiel, if you could answer also.
What I'll tell you, and any filmmaker, is that the secret to mitigating such problems is collaboration. Find like-minded people you can collaborate with. Analyze yourself. Know your strengths, know your weaknesses. In the areas where you find you're weak, find partners who are strong in those areas, and you won't find yourself in such problems. Our business succeeds when we collaborate, and I think everybody in this panel will agree with me that it's not a solo journey. And one thing that I've noticed, I have also been a victim of, is the fear of collaboration. That why should I also have a company, why should I collaborate with AP? But any blockbuster film that you watch, you spend the first 10 seconds looking at a list of at least 5 or 7 companies before the movie starts. And that is the power of collaboration. So just collaborate and you'll avoid such mistakes. And that was our last question. Ladies and gentlemen, asanteni sana, and carry on supporting Kalasha, and let's get out there, network, and build the Kenyan film industry. Thank you very much to our panelists. A round of applause for them, please. And have a good evening. Thank you.